So it's all fairly simple stuff. At the end I'll go through a bit of the more practical stuff, but I'll give you just in the beginning the kind of the root foundation, the thinking behind a lot of the stuff. So that, again, this is stuff that talking to a lot of salons around the world and clients and listening to all the challenges that they face in each market, you kind of hear common themes. And obviously sales is one of the toughest ones. And everyone looks for the silver bullet and everybody wants this like formula to work by that'll give them instant sales, and it just doesn't work like that. So I kind of try to distill it into what I call the 3 top sales skills. And so it's not a formula, it's more of call it a methodology, more of a way of thinking. And then by applying that thinking in your business, you definitely will have to produce more sales. So let's kick it off. There's 3 basic skills. The first skill, number 1, is empathy. That sounds like a fluffy word. You look it up in the dictionary, the definition is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. But in our industry, that means quite a lot. So you guys probably heard me say, I love the saying, people don't care what you know unless they know how much you care. So practicing empathy is the process of showing a client how much you actually really care and how interested you are in their skin, their problems, their life. So empathy, you can break it up into 4 basic components. Number 1 is seeing the world through their eyes. That's probably one of the most important elements, because when most customers walk into a salon, especially if they're new, they would have been exposed to more than likely a different world, many different worlds, different products, different ways of thinking about their skin. And most of you guys will know that 90% of the information people receive out there is false. It's not true. They get fed every day, on mass media about, these quick fixes, Nivea, L'Oreal, etc. All these, look young in 7 days and all that kind of rubbish. But they come into the salon with that kind of mindset. So your first step as an esthetician in this, call it developing this empathy for them, is understanding the way they see the world, and that's based on their history, what they've experienced, what things have disappointed them. Maybe they've had a disappointing treatment, or they have a preconceived idea. That's one of the worst about, like, for example, peeling or acids or lasers or whatever it is. They always come in with a preconceived idea and go, I'm scared of. And so your first step is to really understand through a list of questions, what have been some of the good experiences? What are the bad experiences? What are you afraid of? Or what do you think about? And you can cover some of the basic things that you cover in your salon to understand how they perceive those particular technologies and treatments. Number 2 is then, once you understand it, is understanding how they feel about that particular subject that you discussed, the way they see the world. Have they lost trust in, say, the cosmetic industry because they've tried so many products and never had something that's fixed their problem? Or have they gone to another salon and had a bad experience and therefore have an innate distrust, or feel a little on the back foot? So understanding the emotional state behind how they see the world is very important, so that you can really understand what are positive reinforcements and what are negative reinforcements that they've kind of learned the wrong way. This one, the third one, also sounds very fluffy, appreciating them as human beings. But we all as humans have this innate nature in us that when we encounter someone, you automatically will try and form an opinion of them. It's just something we do as humans. So when someone walks in the door, trying to be as neutral, unbiased as possible in terms of what they think, all that kind of stuff, so that you can, and what that does is it allows you to clearly see their world and understand their feelings more clearly without painting the understanding with your brush, with the way you see the world. That's why being impartial, besides it sounding nice and all fluffy, is important, because it gives you a very central point to understand the information you've been given. And then lastly, of course, the 4th component element to complete it is, once you've understood those first 3, and you really have a very good understanding of how the client sees the world, how they feel about what they've seen and learned, appreciating them for, just being a human being. In other words, having a very unbiased thinking strategy behind what you've learned about them, and then communicating that. The communication part is probably the most important, because if you don't communicate your understanding and how you see, that you understand that they, sorry, let me rephrase, that you understand how they feel and how they see the world is the most important thing. So it's communicating that you completely understand where they're coming from and really what their goals are. Now, there's an interesting human biology behind all this stuff. So I'm going to make the following statement. It's quite a strong one, is that every single human on this planet has the same basic human wiring, irrespective of race, gender, age, or ethnicity. Everyone is wired roughly the same way. And you remember I mentioned in the last chat that we had, I spoke about the limbic system and the neocortex, and how that the limbic system drives the emotional state and how someone feels, and it's the decision-making center, but at the same time has no capacity for language. Whereas our capacity for language and for calculating and our rationale comes out of our neocortex. So every human on the planet has the same basic wiring based on these parts of the brain. And what happens is, and why empathy is so important, is when someone feels uncomfortable or in a state of fear, or just feels a little on the back foot, immediately what happens is, in that state of mind, the limbic system takes control. And it's designed to do that because it wants to protect you. That's what the limbic system's there. It's a short-term protection mechanism. If you're walking across, you're about to cross the road and you catch a car coming out of the corner of your eye, you're going to jump back because that's your limbic system. Or if you're about to, you knock a glass and you catch it before it falls on the floor, that's the limbic system reacting very fast to prevent a particular something going on. The problem with the limbic system is it's designed with it's a very old part of the brain, and it's very reactive and it's very emotional, and it makes people very, call it defensive. It also disengages the neocortex, so that someone's not able to think logically with you about what they need to do. So that's why once you create this empathy and you show the customer that you know every single detail about them, that you really care about their well-being, their brain will flip then into this neutral, or more, call it neocortex mode, where they're now in a calm state and more ready to take in information and to listen to you. So that's why this, on a biological level, empathy is so important. It sounds like a fluffy word, but on a biological level, it's absolutely fundamental. Okay, so that's skill number one. Get that one right. I think that's probably the top sales skill you can have, is empathy by miles. Now, number two, insight. This is an interesting one because this skill is directly related to our industry. Why? Because when a client walks in your front door, 9 times out of 10, they've tried a lot of things and they're now looking for a solution. If it's a new customer, that is, obviously. And your ability as an esthetician to come up with an insight is hugely powerful, because you're in a position of knowledge. You have better knowledge training, you've got experience, you've got a whole lot of experience and knowledge, probably of years of practicing as an esthetician. So insight is that capacity to gain an accurate and deep understanding of, say, someone or something, but in this case, the client's skin and the skin condition, their particular skin. And we all know around the table, everyone's skin is very different. So there's multiple factors at play. For example, environmental factors. Then there's the internal factors. There's factors like their DNA. There's factors like their diet. There's factors like their age, not in terms of chronological age, but in terms of biological age. What, where how healthy is their body? What hormonal state are they in of development? So there's all these factors. And the amazing thing is, in terms of a sales skill, is the magic happens is when you sit down and you use your empathy to gain as much knowledge as you can of your customer, to understand every aspect about them, and you need to record it. It's very important. And then through a process of discussing with the customer, kind of as a collaborative exercise, and you then come to gain an insight. For example, A typical insight would be, I've heard this 1,000 times, is our lady that does skin analysis, her name is Ilda, she'll go in and set up and do a skin analysis. She'll sit with the customer, put them in the device, and you immediately, typically one of the big things we see in SA, because of the environment and the sun and that kind of environment, is a lot of kind of oily or excessively oily skins. And often a client goes, my skin is oily. And this is a simple one. You all know the answer is no, the skin is not oily. The skin typically is dry or dehydrated. And the oil is a reactive mechanism of the skin trying to defend itself against the dryness. So where we are in Joburg especially is a problem because we're quite high up. We're, I think, 1,500 meters above sea level. So the air's pretty dry. And we're far away from the coast. So we see a lot of that. And you have these typical misunderstandings. And then the minute Ilda will sit with the customer and say, no, your skin isn't oily, it's actually dry. And the oil is a reactive skin defense mechanism to try and compensate. A light bulb goes on in that customer's head and they go, oh my God, actually that makes a whole lot of sense. I didn't think about it that way. And you guys have probably been in the chair when you've done that and you've discussed a particular problem with the skin. And then all of a sudden they realize, oh, my skin is, for example, I have a negative feedback cycle. I've probably over moisturized my skin. And so in wintertime, my skin always needs more. Yes, because your skin has lost the ability to produce moisture for itself. Okay, now I understand. And when you have this unlock of knowledge, this insight, there's something that happens in your clients' minds that go, wow, so A, they have empathy for me. B, they really have this understanding. And when you have those two that come together, you have this amazing, powerful combination. So it's really the ability to diagnose, using your knowledge as an esthetician to combine that and come up together with, in the NIMI system, it would be under the skin classification, you'd then identify the particular problem and then craft a solution. So that's super powerful. So number one, empathy. Number two, finding those insights through investigative questioning, building up a profile, and in that process, developing true empathy because you're showing that you really care about all the details, coming up with a solution. And then obviously you guys will go ahead and activate that in Salon through a number of treatments and courses and stuff like that. And if you go through the process of recording your progress methodically, obviously that becomes very powerful down the road. I'll explain why. Okay, so number three, as I said, I'd only do three, so it's easy. Managing objections. Again, how many times you've had a customer come in, and you can see the noun there, an expression or feeling. Remember feeling of disapproval or opinion or opposition. Now remember, I explained to you about the difference between the neocortex and the limbic system. And again, this is one of those things is when a client is in an objective mode or has something they need to air or talk about, they're automatically sitting in limbic mode. So the brain is already in that state of mind that it's defensive. And the minute the brain gets into defensive mode, the cognitive abilities are degraded automatically. So there's actually science that shows that the more we go into the limbic state, so emotional, whether it's anger or disappointment or whatever it is, your ability to make good decisions actually completely degrades because the brain is switched into this limbic mode and not sitting in a neutral balance or more towards the neocortex. So managing objections is really a process of what I call fighting the dragon, because often these objections will come out of incorrect knowledge that they've learned somewhere else, heard somewhere else, an incorrect experience which you now have to go and fix. Maybe it was an incorrect product prescription or something like that, or they didn't use the products correctly. So when you do those, there is a couple of techniques which you can actually use to develop your managing objection skills. For example, one of them is called mirroring the objection. Probably a lot of you know about that. So what happens when a customer expresses something, the first thing you deal with it is you immediately mirror their objection. You repeat what they said one for one. By doing that, you're saying to them, I've heard and I'm listening to your problem. I'm not just waiting for you to unload so that I can give you a response or an answer. And there's several techniques you can use, but what you're trying to do in the managing objections is to get your customer away from using the limbic system and out of the emotional state and back to a rational state where they can think. So mirroring what they say is the first thing, because by saying that you're communicating, I've heard you. That's the single most powerful thing you can do when you're managing an objection, actually, is the other person on the other end of that objection. The main thing they want to know is that you've heard them and that you're listening. They don't, that's 90% of the problem solved if you do that. And then, of course, like I said, there's a lot of the times you'll find out when you start quizzing them and you're managing whatever the objection is, typically it comes out of this, you've heard me talk about it, is the thousands of marketing messages. And in other words, the incorrect perception clients come into the store with, the incorrect ideas they have about whatever it is, microneedling or acid peelings or, whatever it is. They come in with all these incorrect perceptions, and that's where a lot of objections come from. I've heard that AHAs are bad for the skin, or I've heard that a typical one in our industry, and there's no way to fight this. This is how crazy these objections get. Parabens. Parabens are precursors for cancer, and there's all these kinds of things in our industry that are so difficult to deal with. And a lot of them are misconceptions. So being able to manage objections is quite critical, getting them out of the limbic state and back into a neutral or neocortex state. So 9 times out of 10, what I've seen in the industry, and when I talk to industry specialists, is 9 times out of 10 managing objections is really about slaying this mythical dragon. And the mythical dragon is this idea in someone's head that's not true. And that's basically a lot of our job is to do that. So those are the 3 top skills, starting with empathy, building proper empathy. Number 2 is coming to a major insight, and 3, managing the client's objections. If you get those 3 simple things right, your sales will absolutely fly. Now this slide I've stuck up, I mentioned it on the last talk. It was this interesting study by this Business Harvard School prof. And he made this following statement: is 95% of decision making takes place subconsciously, more so, than driven by feelings, more so than logic. So most of the decision making is based on feelings and not on logic, which is counterintuitive, but that's how the process works. And that's why managing your client's state, whether they're in a limbic fearful state or a defensive state, is so important to get them to relax and to work with you. So now I'm going to give you 6 of the top key sales areas. These are areas that you can develop that we've seen that relate to those 3. So for example, empathy is related to number 1, detailed personalized client records and images for every visit for treatment and home care purposes. So that speaks to having a very detailed record of absolutely everything you do per every visit, right down to taking befores and after photos, so that you have very clear records, not just for you. It's good for you as an esthetician therapist to carry good records, solid records, very detailed records, but it's also good for your customer, because it means you can always come back. And then you open that stuff up, she feels appreciated because she knows you're taking the time and energy to focus on all the detailed elements, looking at old photographs, pointing at areas that are improved or areas that are areas of concern that you need to address. So it's being able to keep this constant record keeping is really, really important. We don't see a large number of our client base don't seem to do this particular area very successfully. They keep basic client records, and they walk in and they say hi to the customer and put them in the chair and do a treatment and kiss them and hug them and give them products, and they go home. And they aren't going to that extra depth in terms of keeping really good, very detailed, as detailed as you can get. What diet are they on? How does their skin react during the different seasons? Does their skin have a tendency to really get drier or oilier in the winter seasons versus in the summer? Do they burn easier than other customers? Are they susceptible to post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation? Are they, there's a lot of stuff that will take you time to get to the bottom of. So once you have that record, very powerful to use. So that speaks to empathy. Then the second one, well-stocked shelves. This is a typical retail type statement, and the guys use it in retail business a lot. To stock, we call it stock, sell, stock, and that just simply talks about, that empty restaurant syndrome. You walk into a shop or a restaurant or whatever it is, and it looks empty. It's not inviting people. There's this innate, again, the brain flips immediately when the shelves look empty. That talks about lack, and it talks about not the opposite of abundance. So immediately the brain subconsciously will switch into limbic mode and go, hang on, wait. She won't even think, it'll be subconscious. Something's wrong. I don't know why, but I need to have my guard up. And so that's why having stock shelves and having, for example, the next one down, clear, simple, visible pricing around numbers, and the whole ambiance in your store is so important, because it creates this environment where the person can relax and move out of a limbic stress state into a very balanced, neutral state where they'll communicate with you and interact with you. And in fact, studies have shown, by the way, that you're 6 times more likely to make a sale when you're liked than if you're not liked. And again, it's not about purely being liked for the sake of being liked, but it's creating that rapport, and that gets the person to relax and to feel safe and to feel comfortable around you and in your salon, in your environment. So thinking about creating a safe, comfortable, cozy, inviting environment is absolutely key. So that you'll see there's a few other points, like keeping it fresh and mixing up the layout from time to time to keep the salon interesting is quite important. We find you keep a layout or a certain setup for too long, it becomes stale and a bit boring, and people, they don't feel that energy and excitement about it. So it's good to mix it up. And then the other two I haven't covered is forming strategic partnerships. So we try and do that. We try and encourage our partners to do that, is to find businesses in the area that they can really have a big impact with. So, for example, we've had a couple of salons and clinics that will go and do offer special days at corporates. They'll go and do a day where they'll do a mobile, take out a boardroom and go and do treatments in a corporate environment where people can't get the time to get out of the office and come to you. So you'll go to them, for example. Or, finding businesses that would work synergistically with yours that have similar, half you guys probably done it, where you matchmake with wedding makers, wedding organizers, or, all that kind of stuff. And then lastly, probably the most important is we call it staying top of mind. So obviously, again, it goes back to that previous slide I showed with the brain and the little soldiers, because clients get bombarded with all these ideas all the time. Their preconceptions they build are the most important defense you can give them against incorrect information. So, or let me turn it on its head. The correct information that you give your customers about, or the correct knowledge that you give them, becomes the most powerful defense mechanism for them to dispel all the myths when they walk out of your salon and go into the outer world and are exposed with all these different messages. So consistently interacting and educating your customers all the time is your most powerful tool to keep them loyal. Because, for example, if you say to them, you need a good quality SPF, and not all SPFs are made equal, even though the number on the bottle is the same, it doesn't mean that it gives the same quality of protection. And they'll ask you why. Well, I explained to you why, because the ingredients, and if you start explaining the organic and inorganic chemistry and how it all works with a little bit of knowledge, the minute they walk into into a pharmacy and there's something that's a SPF 100 and it's $20, $30 cheaper than what you have, that's a 40 or a 50 or a 30, they'll know why it's like that. And they'll know because you've told them 100 isn't better than a 40. In fact, it probably is going to be worse, because chemically, for them to get 100 on the bottle means inflammation for your skin. So it's those kind of little things that no one really knows. So those little education tidbits, and that, and that goes a lot towards, that talks about being empathetic. In other words, you're saying, I care about what products you use when you go out there. It talks to managing objections, because they'll walk into you and say, well, I've seen X, Y, and Z is cheaper and it's got a higher number on the bottle. You can have to dispel that objection with using knowledge. So those are the key 6 areas that we've seen can really help you boost your sales. I don't know if you've got any questions on those. That's the